Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for being patient. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. To my viewers around the world, Paul Bartlett in Australia, thank you so much for your generosity and kindness. And the super chat, thank you so much, Paul, as always. Paul Bartlett, everyone in Australia, Philippines, Canada, UK, Nepal, Nigeria, Korea, everyone watching around the world, be here November 5th and beyond. Every day is a countdown to November 5th. Trump will win. There will be some hurdles and obstacles. Unfortunately, we will experience, I believe, unfortunately, heaven forbid, and unfortunately, a devastating market crash and bubble burst of the stock market. I wrote about that in the Federalist 2 years ago, and I explained how Democratic Party policies, Biden's policies especially, and Harris's, have contributed to that. Hit subscribe. Washington Post. Trump seeks delay in New York hush money case sentencing until after November. Vox. What can be done about the Supreme Court's very worst decisions, according to wonderful, morally superior liberal Democrats? If the decisions benefit the Democratic Party, the headline would likely be, the Supreme Court is fantastic and wonderful. Why Republicans dislike these decisions. However, ladies and gentlemen, the Supreme Court ruled, and we will get to that in a couple of minutes, but first we're going to talk about the economy. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Trump numerous times. I predicted that endless times on this channel. They overturned an absurd Colorado ban. They gave Trump immunity for official acts. Anyone who says that Trump can eliminate a political opponent is a complete imbecile. That is not an official act. Speaking to a Department of Justice employee, government employee, is an official act. Giving a speech is an official act. But let's get started. People, the economy, the stock market, from here on out, and I believe the bubble will burst sometime in October, possibly September. That is the only thing you need to worry about or concern yourself with. If you want Trump to win, simply look at what happens with the stock market. I don't want people to lose money, but when the stock market does completely tank and the bubble bursts in the market, Trump will 100% be secured of a victory. We'll talk more about that and the Supreme Court in a couple of minutes. Let's get to the fact that a recession is on the horizon. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. Thank you, Paul, and thank you to my super chat. Thank you, Paul Bartlett in Australia. I love you. Thank you.
My next guest is probably the most noticeable person kind of pushing back on the Assam rule because, well, it's Claudia Saylor. She's a chief economist at New Century Advisors. All right, Claudia, we spoke just recently. And it seems everyone now, here's an interesting thing. Everyone's adding their own tidbits to your indicator. Now, I'm not sure if you ever put out an official pamphlet, but people are saying yes, but, no, but. In fact, give you an example. Someone could use the full-time jobs versus part-time jobs, right? That's indicating a potential recession. So what do you need to see to be convinced that recession, we're in it or it's right around the corner?
A recession is a broad-based contraction economic activity. So I think we need to see more signs of it. I don't think we need to see more signs to have, say, policymakers act like the Federal Reserve. But in terms of like really saying this is a recession, we're not there. The labor market data, and frankly, if it continues to worsen, that is a very negative sign because a lot of the other measures we have will revise a lot. The very first chart you showed about what it looked like before with the SOM rule and other data, and now, well, you know, that's what the data look like right now for 2001. Like Anna Wong has been very clear about, we have to be careful that particularly in moments where the economy turns, it can be really hard to measure it.
So the market rebounded after a mini crash. I do believe that there's going to be another stock market bubble burst. This one being a, historic market downturn. The reason is because you can't have low inflation with high interest rates and say recession is not on the horizon. A good economy has low interest rates and low inflation. That's a good economy. End of story. A bad economy has 3% inflation or 2.9% inflation. They're so happy, but they don't realize that that Biden released strategic petroleum reserves into the economy and then raised interest rates. So they don't understand that. See, you have Democratic Party pundits, liberal pundits on YouTube and other platforms. They have millions of subs. They don't talk about inflation. They don't talk about interest rates. If they say that inflation is low, they don't mention that interest rates are high. When you cut interest rates, which is what they want, a 50, 75 basis point cut, well, inflation goes up. It also makes the bond market more turbulent because you're messing with yields. And so you saw what happened with the carry trade in Japan. Japan has very, very low interest rates. We have high interest rates, and that's what took place. But you don't want to. They don't want to. The Fed didn't cut interest rates because they didn't want inflation to skyrocket. That's one of the reasons, and they didn't want the bond market to be. They didn't want to create volatility in the bond market. But let's continue, ladies and gentlemen. Paul Bartlett, thank you.
And you know, I mean, for me also, we not only do we get the rate of change sometimes speeds up on the way down. There's revisions, and we find out what we thought wasn't true. And I want to go back and I actually did go back and read transcripts of this emergency Fed meeting. It was January 3rd, 2001. Greenspan, he argued for an emergency rate cut, and he talked about a lot of things that it seems like this could be the conversation at the Fed right now. And he said, listen, he compared to this comforting feeling that most economists say that we're not there yet. He said it was of a person falling off a 30-story building and still experiencing a state of tranquility 10 floors above the street. So far, so good. He went on to say that he was asked, well, is this an emergency cut? Would it be a sort of insurance policy? And he said, yes. Is that the way maybe the Fed should be looking at this now?
Well, the Fed should be watching very carefully what's happening with the data. I think especially with the next employment report will be decisive for what they do in December. A difference between now and back when Greenspan was making those very, he was right on there, is that the markets, they're doing some of that intermeeting work for the Fed. Right. When the jobs report came out, we've seen the futures federal funds rate, we've seen some of the interest rates moved up. That's what we need, is to take a little bit of pressure off, right? A sign of a recession, a sign of not even a recession, just weakening that is going past what is necessary to get inflation down. Well, steps should be taken. It doesn't just have to be the Fed cutting rates. It can also be the anticipation of that coming. The Fed does have to then deliver, but they don't have to do it in between.
So if the market is overvalued and there is a recession on the horizon, let me ask everyone here, if Biden and Harris's policies have caused a potential recession or a recession and the Fed cuts rates, you tell me in the live chat, what happens? Does more money go into the stock market? And then the stock market becomes what? More valued or more overvalued? If more money goes into an already overvalued stock market, what happens when the bubble bursts? So if it goes to 41,000, 42,000 in the Dow, you tell me what happens. A 10-point downturn burst is 4,000 points down. You think the market rebounds immediately from a 4,000-point downturn? That's 10%. Okay, 10% used to be, 20 years ago, 1,000-point downturn over 20 years ago or so. What do you think happens? What do you think happens if the market is already overvalued and the Fed cuts rates by 50 basis points? Then more money is pumped into the stock market, which makes things even more overvalued, and we have a potential recession on the horizon. So It's just a matter of if it's before November, Trump wins 100%. If it's after November, I mean, there's a small chance Harris wins, but I think the debate will solidify Trump's victory.
That is a big, break glass.
Right. So no emergency cut for you, but you were saying cut that even before the jobs report, you told me the Fed was behind. So are we now at a point where you want to see, or we need a 50 basis point cut in September?
Given all that we know now, I think a 50 basis point cut would be appropriate. Do I think that's what the Fed is going to do? Not unless they really feel like they have to, right? They would like to go gradually, and I think that's I think the that could be very appropriate. My view is they should have been cutting for a while because the economy it's easing off and it is normalizing. The Fed needs to normalize. So they should be doing some catch up. I think, unfortunately, I think that probably is where they're going to be headed, because I think what we're seeing, even if the SOM rule is overstating it some, it is picking up on something. And many of these other indicators you showed are picking up on something that is very worrisome.
All right. I only have maybe 20 seconds, so I'll ask a personal question. Now that you're famous everywhere, you're getting free drinks, people opening more doors for you. I mean, how is it to be like the ultimate?
So it's not good for Democrats that we're talking about a recession. I don't think Harris is going to win. I believe Trump will win. The Supreme Court victories with Trump. There's another victory on the horizon. They're going to overturn or at least block the jail sentence. It's completely unconstitutional. A state cannot indict somebody on a federal crime without the federal government involved. But you tell me in the comments section, are we in a recession? Will we enter a recession? And what happens if there is a 50 basis point rate cut? Well, that's a rhetorical question. You tell me in the comment in live chat.
Square Group founder and Trump donor, Scott Bessent. Scott, great to see you in person. Yep. What do you make of Kamala Harris stealing the...
This man is absolutely brilliant, by the way. He is absolutely brilliant. I love his analysis on finance and politics and everything.
No tax on tips, because that's all she's got. She's got no agenda, no policy ideas except what she lifted from President Trump.
Well, I think a few things about Vice President Harris is, one, she's trying to run from the Harris-Biden economy. And, as we know, President Biden for the past, we don't know whether it's months or years, has been unable to run anything. So we have to assume that it was Vice President Harris who was in charge. And she is running as far away as she can. They've already talked about tax increases, this adding 87,000 agents to the IRS. I think what most people don't know, last year, 67% of the audits were on people making under $200,000 a year. So, this is not a friendly, a small person friendly administration. The other thing that has happened is the bottom 50% of Americans have been in a recession for 2 years. When she comes out and says, my priority, when I become president is going to be to help the middle class, they've wiped out the middle class.
I don't usually say this, and by the way, this man is absolutely brilliant, but I don't usually say this about Democrats. Look, God bless America. If Kamala Harris becomes president, God bless her. I wish the country and her only the best. I do believe Trump will win. I do believe there's like a 95% chance that Trump will win. I give Harris 5% or somebody. Who knows what Democrats do? Maybe they replace Harris with Clinton. Who knows? Okay. But I'll say this. If, and I think there's only a 5% chance that a Democrat gets the White House. If Democrats, yet again, are victorious and they keep the Oval Office, God bless America. God bless Harris. If she's, the first female president, God bless her. I will say that's the caveat or the preface. I don't think the country can rebound. I don't want to use the word survive, because the country will survive, but I don't think the country will rebound from another 4 years of Democrats. It will take 8 to 12 years of Trump, or one of Trump's, Donald Trump Jr. or somebody, J.D. Vance, somebody. What Democrats have done, it's been an unmitigated disaster in terms of the economy. Half of the electorate still focuses on Trump's personality. They don't care about a future financial crisis. They don't care about the border. They don't care about an abysmal, catastrophic, complete, abject failure of foreign policy. They don't care. It's about sensibilities, and that's it. But if we have another 4 years of Biden and Harris and the same foreign policy, the same global catastrophes, the same interest rates, high inflation, zero border pretty much, it will take at least 12 years to rebound, because the financial collapse from Democratic Party policies, if we have more of those policies, it's an unmitigated disaster financially. That being said, I don't think that's going to happen. I think Trump is going to be victorious, but I don't think we rebound as a country until, we would need 8 years of a Reagan and 4 years of Herbert Walker Bush too. And I'm not a fan of George W., but the father was okay or better. I just don't know how the country rebounds after 4 more years of high inflation, high interest rates, a stock market bubble, a recession that we had in 2022, another recession, unmitigated disaster in terms of foreign policy. You tell me in the live chat, do we rebound after 4 more years of Harris? And do we rebound? I don't know. I don't know how long it takes.
And who's done well? The top 10 or 20%, people with assets. They spent and spent. They pushed the stock market up. The Fed has kept rates high, but they keep spending. So the deficit. We never had a deficit like this before. 7% of GDP during peacetime or non-recessionary times. So they wanted to tax Venmo transactions or transactions that were under $600. So this is not an economy or a plan for the little people.
Yeah, to your point, Scott, the wage gap was shrinking under the Trump years, and it's only expanded. The difference between the haves and the have-nots under the Biden era, which is what socialism or communism always gets us. But I think we always come back to this point of the American people like authentic. In Donald Trump, whether you like him or not, he's authentic and he's telling you what he thinks. Where Kamala Harris with the laughter, but also the fakeness with which she steals Trump's policy on let's not tax tips, when she was the tie-breaking vote to make sure we could have more IRS agents to go after the very tips that she's saying she wants to protect from. But what's troubling is I think because the media pushes this narrative that she's so brilliant and she's so great, that a lot of the American people will buy that, as opposed to seeing that it was Donald Trump's original idea and it came from him.
Well, look, the idea that this administration or part of this administration is going to cut taxes is like saying Hannibal Lecter is going to become a vegan. Right. They've already told us that they're going to have huge tax increases. Yeah. They want the Tax Cuts and Job Act to expire. If that expires, that will be the single biggest tax hike in history. Never been this big before. So,
but on middle income and lower income Americans as well.
Yeah, well, they also, they keep saying that it will only be for people who make more than $400,000, but they also want to raise the capital gains rate. And that will affect everyone, whether you make $10 a year, $10 million a year.
Right. They also want to tax unrealized capital gains of wealthy people. That will destroy our innovation economy. That is an existential threat to U.S. Technological development and everything that we hold dear in terms of innovation. But I want to get to this really quickly. The Biden-Harris administration launching a brand new effort to crack down on private businesses, dubbing it, quote, Time is money. That's what it's called, the initiative. Ironically, coming from a team who has seen the cost of federal regulations that they've laid on businesses skyrocket to almost 1.7.
So Democrats love regulations, okay, but the thing is, do they know, like, what are these regulations about? Are they about government control? Or are they about protecting the environment or protecting consumers or protecting national security? So are there regulations that are impeding business growth, that are making it difficult for entrepreneurs to make money and then pay employees? When Bernie Sanders and AOC and others, and I used to be the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet, according to the Huffington Post. I was the unofficial scribe of Sanders' most hardcore voters, according to the Washington Post. You can go to my website, hagoodman.com, and see those articles. Well, Bernie Sanders, God bless him, never started a business, from what I understand. At least never had a successful business. AOC never had a successful business. None of these socialists or democratic socialists ever employed anyone. So what is it that they know about the economy? I used to want to ban fracking and want, high minimum wage and all these things, but does that hurt the economy? Does that hurt the average American? Does it hurt the working class? Of course it does. What do you think happens in California and other states that raise minimum wage? Well, companies cut hours. They lay off staff. You're not going to deceive or trick multinational corporations into paying more money to middle class or working class workers because you've raised the minimum wage, for example. They'll simply lay off workers or cut staff or cut hours. That's what they do. So you're not going to they keep doing things like, oh, the billionaires raise the minimum wage. You need good jobs, and you need a lot of jobs, and you need manufacturing, and you need all of these things that impoverished areas of the country don't have. Okay, the manufacturing sectors within the United States of America are dwindling. Why doesn't Bernie Sanders or AOC talk about that? Because they don't care. That's the problem. It's a racket. The working class democratic socialist performance art is a racket. I can tell you, I saw it firsthand with my own eyes. They don't understand economics. They don't understand what an entrepreneur does. They don't understand business or corporations and how businesses circumvent their idealistic policies. If businesses and corporations easily circumvent Bernie Sanders' policies or AOC's policies, what does the left have? They have nothing. Because at the end of the day, Harris or any Democratic Party candidate isn't going to say ban fracking. They're not going to say these things because they know it doesn't work. They're not even talking about single payer. None of the economic policies on the far left work. There's a far left socialist magazine. I'm not going to give you the name. Do you want to know what it sells for at Barnes & Noble? $15! The socialists are selling, or the democratic socialists, or the communists, or the far left, or who don't like capitalism, are selling a publication. It's about $14.90, 95 cents, something like that. It's $14.95. Something like that. They're selling a far left socialist communist publication for close to $15. You're going to pay $15 for a magazine? Anyway, let's continue.
$1 trillion and counting under their watch. That is borne by businesses and ultimately borne by every worker at a time, Scott, that the hourly labor market, in addition to the salaried labor market, is beginning to really crack and suffer under the strain of this weak economy.
Well, look, you've got two candidates who have never in their adult lives gotten a paycheck that was not from a government entity. They have never been in the private sector. The New York Times wrote a story on this today, and they thought it was good. I think it's appalling. They have only, since college, they have Vice President Harris, Governor Walz have only gotten government checks, so they have no idea what it's like to meet payroll, what it's like to sign the front of a check, what it's like to take some risk. They have never taken a risk.
And it shows in the policies that they push. Scott, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
Great to see you.
Always so wonderful.
Always.
Brilliant analysis. Brilliant analysis. Let's listen to what happened to bond yields when there was that market downturn a couple weeks back. And that was the precursor to a terrible, terrible bubble burst crash in the financial sector, I think in October.
Trouble on the way. He joins us from Chicago with bond yields down sharply. Rick, Mohammed Al-Arian was just tweeting that 100 basis point move in the 2-year is a really, really worrisome sign. That's a month to date, or over the past month. What would you say?
I would say that I would have expected some worrisome signs considering everything we've been through, how long they kept rates low, how they have used their models and trusted all the data given that seasonalities may be a bit different than they were pre-pandemic. I'm not surprised. Matter of fact, if you look at the 1 week charts, the week to date, I mean, we closed at 438 in the 2-year. You can't make that. It's a huge move. He's right. I just don't think it's surprising. And if you look at 419 closing 10s. Now, here's what's really interesting. I continue to say that these guys, one of the big trades everybody's talked about that is working quite well is that steepener, 2s, 10s. It's hovering under minus 10 right now. It's at a 2-year, the least inverted. And look at the VIX. Right now, it's flying at the highest level since March of last year. And that is a good segue for this guy. Hi, Chem.
Hey, how are you, Rick?
If I do recall, we kind of warned viewers last time we chatted last week that volatility could get really juiced, especially some of the sector rotation. Why don't you pick it up right where we left off?
Yeah, buy them when you can, not when you have to, right? The reality is there's a rotation that's been going on. Risk is in the market. Ultimately, there's a buyer and a seller. It's a zero-sum game, right? But when risk gets concentrated into a part of the market and leverage, it becomes a problem. So a very violent rotation like we've been seeing can catch certain people off guard and really drive volatility at the center of the market. And that's what we're seeing, along with poor vol supply in the back end of the curve. Now vol is starting to expand, and that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, we've talked about this reflexive kind of strain that's always present in the market. We were talking about it with regard to mortgages. So mortgage rates are moving lower now. Maybe they'll get to 6.5. Maybe they'll actually get lower than that. But what can that do? What do we think of?
Well, it's asymmetric, right? There's enough pent-up demand. We're running a demand-style economy now that when those rates come down, much like they did in December when they started pricing in the cuts, you can see a pretty quick reaction to GDP and to growth. The problem is it's a slowing economy. It's dramatically slowing. And there's a wealth effect, which is ultimately with the market coming down, reflexively slowing the market at the same time. So we'll likely get demand, which will drive inflation.
And pricing pressures, and the Fed's going to have to deal with its own medicine. But yet, we all know that housing is huge if you want to try to spark some life back in the economy. Any final thoughts?
Well, I would watch, Powell and what he has to say coming up. I think they were very vague for a reason in the last commentary. I think they really have an adjustment to make. This is to make this a reflexive machine, and he's watching these markets closely. They say they don't manage markets, but markets are money supply, and the more the market goes down, the more problem we have with liquidity.
Absolutely, and anyone who doesn't think they have both eyes on equities today is probably wrong.
So the Fed has to watch the bond market, not just the stock market, but the bond market also. Okay? You lower interest rates dramatically, then there's a dramatic change in the bond market, which could then cause a dramatic change in the stock market. Big problem. You're on thin ice, and you're basically juggling the bond market and the stock market on a tricycle on thin ice. This is pretty awesome, ladies and gentlemen. Hit subscribe if you're new. Paul Bartlett, everyone here, thank you.
Competent, and in my opinion has a very low IQ. But we'll find out about her IQ during the debate. Okay, let's find out about her IQ.
By the way, there are people who would rather pay double in terms of mortgage payments, have high inflation, high interest rates, a terrible economy, jobless claims going up, a recession, terrible foreign policy, as long as the sensibilities are taken care of. Trump ruffles the feathers of too many Americans. This is the only generation, and I say this as part of this generation of Americans, this is the only era in American politics where sensibilities take precedent over one's pocketbook. That's because God bless the generation that grew up during the Depression, after the Depression. If you're in your 80s and you're watching, God bless you, I love you. 70s, God bless you, I love you. You remember stories about the Depression. You remember stories about, you probably felt economic downturns. You remember them. 87, 2000, you remember them very well. You don't even have to be in your 70s. You could be in your 50s, 60s. This era of American politics is about social media. It's about internet. It's about, things that are infinitely less important than the Great Depression. And people care about their sensibilities more than their pocketbook, their money, their finances. If you don't like Trump and you know you're going to make more money with Trump, why on earth wouldn't you vote for him? Oh, that's right. Because he's mean. He's unfit. He's unfit. The only people saying Trump is unfit to be president are already wealthy. If you're not wealthy and you're saying Trump is unfit, you better rethink your assessment.
So, we have this great system. I want to show you just one other thing, please. Do you mind putting it up, please? Thank you.
We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And
and I haven't been to Europe. Burn.
No, I don't understand the point that you're making. Talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time.
Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia is a powerful country. Russia decided to invade a smaller country called Ukraine. So basically that's wrong.
So you're now no longer are you necessarily keeping those private files in some file cabinet that's locked in the basement of the house. It's on your laptop, and it's then therefore up here in this cloud that exists above us, right?
The Caribbean nations, island nations, in the Western Hemisphere. That is where the Caribbean is. We are also in the Western Hemisphere. They are our neighbors. I am here, standing here on the northern flank, on the eastern flank, talking about what we have in terms of the eastern flank. I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been. Space is exciting. It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day. Every day it is time for us to agree that there are things and tools that are available to us to slow this thing down. We will work together and continue to work together to address these issues, to tackle these challenges, and to work together as we continue to work.
Do you ban plastic straws?
I think we should. Yes. I mean, look, I'm going to be honest. It's really difficult to drink out of a paper straw when if you don't gulp it down immediately, it starts to bend. And then, the little thing catches it, and then, so we got to kind of perfect that one a little bit more. Do you know, a bit of a history lesson. Do you know that the women's teams were not allowed to have brackets until 2022? So the United States shares a very important relationship, which is an alliance with the Republic of North Korea. AI is kind of a fancy thing. First of all, it's 2 letters. It means artificial intelligence. As a woman, there's a balance to be struck between being tough and being a
So if you listen to Kamala's speeches, you'd never even know that she's been running the country. She's been running the country for 4 years and doing a horrible job. Look at what's happened to our country. We are a failing nation. I hate to say it, we are a failing nation. I wish I didn't have to do this. I wish I didn't have to go and do this. I wish they were great. I wish they'd make our country great, but they're going to destroy our country. You know it, they even know it, and probably they're doing it on purpose. It's hard to believe, but they're probably doing it.
Democrats don't care. They're running Biden 2.0, but it's different than 4 years ago. I give Trump 95% chance victory.
Again, as if we need it, reminding that the consumer is hurting. Take a look at this from Hershey. They note,
look, people, ladies and gentlemen, my beloved viewers, God bless you all. Paul Bartlett, thank you again. To my viewers in Australia, thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, forget the polls. Do not look at the polls. If Kamala Harris could be up 5 points tomorrow, who cares? She could be up 6 points nationally. It doesn't matter. Focus only on the economy and the stock market. That's it. The market could go up to 41,000 in early September. That's fine. Heaven forbid the bubble bursts, the financial collapse takes place, Trump wins 99.9%. I don't want people to lose money. That's the political calculus.
consumers are pulling back on discretionary spending. Meanwhile, Wayfair, they're actually making comparisons. Look at this statement at the bottom, folks. They're making comparisons to the great financial crisis. Now, my next guest posted her weekly note a couple of days ago looking at what's gone wrong and what's gone right. I want to bring in now Piper Sandler, Chief Global Economist Nancy Lazar. Nancy, thanks for joining us. Earlier in the week, you noted that corporate earnings have been stronger than you expected and not recessionary, but I do find it intriguing. We're looking at the fact set, and companies with more than half their business in the United States, they're only growing at 4%, whereas those outside this country are growing at 22%. So it seems to me that the message still, the domestic economy may not be as strong as those earnings are suggesting.
I definitely agree with that. I look at earnings from an economic perspective, and absolutely the headline number for 2Q is coming in on the stronger side. But I pull them apart, and I only could find 3, maybe 4 areas that are really helping to boost the economy. Not surprisingly, defense, artificial intelligence, and Wall Street, investment banks. I might add retailers, online retailers to that list. But then I have 12 other sectors in the consumer space alone that are really, really struggling. Autos, we think there's going to be, we're going to get auto sales today for July. They might be up a little bit from June because of some technical issues in June, but they've been basically flat for the past year. We think auto inventories are at record highs by a wide margin. We have excess inventory in the auto space, and so we're thinking we're going to get a decline in price. That's going to be particularly painful for the.
By the way, not that this is any foreshadowing, but auto sales plummeted right before 1929, the crash. Again, you're talking about 100 years ago, and that is also a barometer of what's going on.
The auto industry, because obviously they just gave big wage increases. So we think profit margins in many, many consumer sectors, from autos to airlines to restaurants, are going to get squeezed as consumers pull back. I love your Hershey example. The price of sweets, of candy, has gone up 22% in 3 years. Right. They wonder why sales are weakening.
Hey, by the way, we're going to show your list, right? Your echo message that you're getting from pulling these apart. Again, to your point, three areas of strength: defense, AI.
Look at this chart. Defense, AI, investment banks have gone up in Biden's economy. What has been going down? Autos, airlines, restaurants, food, candy, wine, spirits, staples, house-related products, higher-end consumer products, discount apparel. When you see discount apparel stores going under, that's a bad sign. Recreation equipment, consumer debt, software, semis, Commercial real estate, that's a big problem. Delivery, freight, battery factories, temporary employment. Oh my God. Okay. That's bad.
Investment banking in 19. Golly, I mean, this covers a wide swath of areas. So it sounds like, I mean, if you're looking at this just from my perspective and the viewer's perspective, it seems like recession could be right around the corner.
Well, you're starting to see the unemployment backdrop deteriorate. I know the level of the unemployment rate is low at 4.1%, but it is up. It's up from 3.4. It's on the verge of triggering the SOM rule. Second, unemployment claims we saw this morning, clearly higher. One of the things I do is I keep lists like you just showed, and there's a growing list of layoff announcements this week. Intel was at the top of it. And then the question is, why are companies doing that? And I listened to your previous guests, and we would say we are now just moving into the high risk period of a recession. It on average takes 10 quarters after a Fed tightening cycle to dip the economy into a recession. And so that way I agree with you. And this is now the 10th quarter. And I agree with you on that Wayfair comment. You are popping the stay-at-home bubble. Housing is experiencing a double dip. And so indeed, we think it could be a painful as we move into the fourth quarter is when our best guess of when a recession starts.
So, Nancy, where does this put the Fed, and Jay Powell, who it was interesting to me yesterday. He was fumbling through his book a lot. He was relying on the book a lot. There were a couple of answers that he did not want to give without reading them verbatim. So it's obvious that to a degree he's walking on eggshells and trying to get this right. What's your assessment?
Yeah. So I would give the Fed an A in 2020. I might give them a C in 21 for not tightening quick enough as inflation accelerated. And I would give their cautiousness.
By the way, the Fed and Democrats and Biden said that inflation was temporary in 2021. They were taking a victory lap.
This year, I take them back up to a B. I think they have been right to be cautious. This has been the biggest inflation price increase we've seen since the back half of the 1960s. It was not just transitory. It was due to massive monetary fiscal stimulus. And I think the Fed has acted prudent in not cutting more aggressively, let alone cutting yesterday, given the risk to which I think is still a potential problem if we don't have a recession. We think we need a recession to get a sustained shift down in inflation, or we risk potentially going back into something like the early 1970s.
Wow. Nancy Lazar, you're one of the best. I appreciate you sharing all that with us. Thank you.
Did you hear that last part, ladies and gentlemen? That is frightening. Hit subscribe to this channel if you're new. I'll be back tomorrow. God bless you all. Paul Bartlett and my super chat, everyone in the super chat, thank you so